April 9, 1973, in a high-end residential area inside Beirut, Lebanon, residents there still saw several pairs of men and women walking on the street, holding hands, and some with their arms around each other, looking like couples who had just come from a night out, almost midnight. But they had no idea that those women were actually highly trained Israeli commandos, and under their long dresses and in the large bags they were carrying were high-caliber guns and bombs. In just a few moments, they would carry out one of the most daring missions in Israel's history to eliminate the masterminds behind the killing of Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics. This is the action-packed story behind Operation Sprint. On September 5, 1972, the Munich Olympics ended in tragedy after 11 Israeli athletes were killed. For Israel, it couldn't just end there. They wanted to find the people they believed were behind what they called Black September and other operations against them. By October 1972, they got a huge lead. 3 of the top officials who masterminded the killing of the athletes in Munich were located. On Verdun Street, West Beirut, Lebanon, a crowded residential area. First, Mohammed Yusuf al-Najjar, or Abu Yusuf. He was a veteran Fatah leader, former head of internal intelligence, and one of Yasser Arafat's deputies. Second, Kamal Adwan, a senior operations commander connected to operations against Israel. And third, Kamal Nasser, a well-known writer and spokesman of the PLO, or Palestine Liberation Organization. The problem is, the Israelis couldn't just bomb the place with their planes. It's a high-end residential area. There were Arab, British, and Italian families also living in the same buildings. One wrong bomb, and many civilians would be affected. That's why if Israel was going to make a move, they had to get close to the targets themselves, almost face-to-face. In January 1973, Mossad sent the undercover operative Yael Mann to Beirut. She had the codename Nielsen. Her cover was that of a foreign researcher supposedly working on a television project in the area. She rented an apartment almost directly facing the buildings of the 3 targets. From there, she would begin to watch the area every day. What time do the targets leave? Where do their guards position themselves? Which routes do the vehicles take? And when is the street at its quietest? She also took photos of the building and even possible landing areas for the Israeli commandos by the seaside. It was like she was slowly building the entire map of the mission. But there was another problem. Even though the intelligence was complete, Mossad realized it was too risky. If they were the only ones to act, they would need people skilled in quick raids, close quarter fighting, and extraction under gunfire. That's why the Israeli Defense Forces commandos got involved. Their first plan was to send in almost 100 soldiers at midnight to take control of the entire building. Where the targets lived, they would evacuate the residents and then search for the 3 men. But IDF Chief of Staff David Elazar didn't like this plan. It was too slow and too obvious. And if the whole of Beirut woke up, the soldiers might not be able to get out. So he called the commander of the elite Sayeret Matkal, Lieutenant Colonel Ehud Barak. When Barak looked at the plan, he had a simpler idea. They didn't need to look like an assault force. They needed to look like ordinary people. They would land from the sea, be picked up by Mossad using civilian cars, and enter Beirut like tourists. But there was one problem. If a group of tough-looking men walked through that part of the neighborhood at midnight, they would definitely be noticed. So they came up with a unique strategy. Some of the commandos would dress as women, including Lieutenant Colonel Ehud Barak himself, who would wear a wig, dress, and makeup. He would be joined by another officer, Amarim Levin, who would also pretend to be a woman. They practiced on the streets of Tel Aviv, Israel, along with other commandos, on how to walk as if they were a couple, arm in arm, holding hands, just like a normal couple going home after a date. But underneath their clothes and inside their large handbags, their high-caliber weapons were hidden. When the night of April 9, 1973 came, the operation was a go. This was called Operation Spring of Youth, which was part of the larger Operation Wrath of God. From the Haifa Naval Base in northern Israel, 8 Israeli Navy missile boats departed, carrying a total of 75 soldiers. Included were 21 commandos from Sayeret Matkal, 34 soldiers from the Shayetet 13 Naval Commandos, and 20 soldiers from the paratroopers brigades Sayeret Shan Hanim. They also brought along 19 Zodiac inflatable boats. The large missile boats couldn't go straight to Beirut because just one look and the element of surprise would be gone. So they stopped about 12 miles from the coast of Lebanon, and there they began transferring the assault teams to the small Zodiac boats. But before they could make a move, they were still waiting for one important confirmation. In Beirut, a Mossad operative codenamed Nielsen met with someone. Their only question was, are all 3 of them at home? After the final surveillance, Nielsen confirmed that Nabo Yusuf, Kamal Adwan, and Kamal Nasser were there. That was what the entire force had been waiting for. The Mossad agent immediately radioed the operatives that the mission was a go. One by one, the commandos got into the Zodiac boats and quickly approached the shores of Beirut. But as they got closer to the shore, they turned off the engine, because in the quiet of midnight, the sound of the motor could be heard from the beach. So for the last few hundred meters, they just used paddles. And here, the operation became a bit unusual. The commandos avoided getting their clothes wet. That's because most of them were dressed as women. Just imagine highly trained Special Forces operators wearing wigs, long dresses, and makeup, but while crossing the Mediterranean Sea, they still had to make sure their hair wouldn't get wet, their makeup wouldn't smudge, and their wigs wouldn't get ruined. So just one mistake in their appearance, and they could be noticed right away. When they arrived at the private beach of the Sands Hotel, the Mossad operatives were already waiting. A few days before this, on April 6, Mossad operatives arrived in Beirut using fake British, German, and Belgian passports. They checked into the hotel, rented civilian cars, and parked them near the landing site. And they didn't just choose ordinary vehicles. They used nice and expensive civilian cars to blend in with the high-end neighborhood of Beirut. As soon as the commandos came ashore, they quickly got into the cars. No military uniforms, no helmets, no obvious assault gear. They just looked like a group of tourists and couples coming back from a late-night stroll. Ehud Barak, the commander of Sayeret Matkal, was disguised as a brunette woman. Also in disguise was Amiram Levin, another officer wearing a wig, long clothes, and makeup. To be more convincing, they walked arm in arm with the male commandos, pretending to be couples. They didn't drive all the way to the entrance of the target buildings. About 2 blocks before Verdun Street, the assassination teams got out. From there, they walked. They moved quietly and relaxed. No running, no signs of nervousness. Around them, it was just the ordinary Beirut nightlife. But as they approached the 2 7-story buildings, every commando knew that in just a few minutes, they would have to enter the apartments, kill the 3 main targets, take documents, and get out before all of Beirut found out who they really were. And when they reached the building, they noticed something. The PLO guards they expected to block their way were asleep inside their vehicles. So nothing stopped the Israeli commandos. They went straight into the building, and while Barak and the backup team stayed outside to keep watch, 3 assault teams went up toward the 3 apartments. They were carrying explosive charges. Upon arriving at the target building on Verdun Street, the Israeli commandos quickly split up. 3 small assault teams went up to the apartments of Abu Yusuf, Kamal Adwan, and Kamal Nasser. Meanwhile, Ehud Barak stayed outside with the backup team to guard the perimeter and to block any reinforcements or Lebanese security forces that might suddenly arrive. The backup team also included a doctor. Inside the building, everything was quiet. The guards they expected to encounter in the hallway did not become a problem. That's why the Commandos were able to reach the very doors of the target apartments almost without being noticed. That's where they attached the explosive charges. But they couldn't just detonate at the same time without coordination. So each assault team gave a signal to Barak using the radio. 3 clicks when they're ready. Once Barrett confirmed that all 3 teams were in position, he responded with 5 clicks. That was the go signal. At the same time, he also gave a signal to Brigadier General Emmanuel Shakid that the other coordinated attacks in other parts of Beirut and Sidon included in the plan could begin. And just a few seconds later, the 3 doors blew open. In the apartment of Mohammed Yusuf al-Najjar, or Abu Yusuf, the target woke up to the commotion and quickly hid in a room with his wife. Lead Commando Muki Betzer and another commando entered and fired at the door of the room. Najjar was killed while his wife was also seriously wounded. They were supposed to collect more documents, but Betzer heard gunfire outside. That meant chaos had already broken out. In the other apartment, Kamal Nasir was at his desk when the commandos stormed in. He didn't just surrender. He grabbed a pistol and fired. He managed to shoot an Israeli commando in the leg before being killed. Meanwhile, Kamal Adwa came out of his apartment holding an AK-47. But the assault team was already waiting, so he was killed immediately. The commandos quickly grabbed any important documents they could carry. But while this was happening, a bigger problem started on the street. A PLO guard who had been sleeping in his car woke up and came out holding a pistol. Barak and Amiram Levin were the first to exchange gunfire with him. The guard was killed, but a bullet hit the car, and suddenly the horn blared in the quiet residential area. The residents woke up, someone called the police, and just a few minutes later, the armed Lebanese internal security forces arrived. Suddenly, the mission changed. From a quiet assassination raid, it turned into a gunfight in the middle of Beirut. While the shooting was happening on Verdun Street, it didn't mean that the other Israeli teams would stop. In fact, that was just the beginning of an even bigger raid in the city. Outside the apartment, Ehud Barak and the backup team were already exchanging gunfire with the arriving Lebanese security forces. Responders from the nearby police station quickly increased in number. So as the assassination teams were coming out of the buildings, they were met with an intense firefight. This is when the Israelis used heavy weapons to stop their pursuers. Muki Betzer even threw a grenade at a jeep carrying Lebanese reinforcements. 3 out of the 4 passengers were killed instantly. A few moments later, the Mossad agents arrived as well. They brought the rented cars. The commandos quickly squeezed inside. Before they finally left, they left behind road spikes to puncture the tires of any police vehicles that might try to chase them. But as they were escaping back to the beach, they encountered a Lebanese army armored personnel carrier patrolling near the shore. Fortunately, they weren't stopped. They went straight to the landing area. While that was happening, the fighting at another target was getting even more intense. Because aside from the 3 main targets, another group of Israeli commandos also attacked a multi-story building being used as a hideout by other members of the group involved in the killing of the athletes in Munich. The commandos were also dressed as civilians. At first, their entry went smoothly. They killed the guards at the entrance. But there was one guard post they didn't see. Suddenly, gunfire erupted from there. 3 Israeli soldiers were seriously hit. And this is where the extraction became chaotic. 2 of the wounded were immediately loaded into a waiting car. The 3rd was carried out by one of the commandos. Then another guard approached and wrestled with him. Fortunately, the attacker retreated after being wounded, and the injured Israeli was also brought into the vehicle. Even though they already had wounded soldiers, they did not retreat. He ordered them to continue the mission. The commandos planted explosives in the building. When they returned to the parking area, there was another problem. They were supposed to have 3 vehicles, but only 2 were left. The vehicle with 2 wounded people suddenly disappeared after the driver panicked in the middle of the gunfight. He went straight to the beach. The team didn't know where it was, but they were out of time, so they just squeezed into the remaining vehicle. As they drove away, they detonated the explosives and the entire building collapsed. When they got to the beach, they also found the missing car. But it was too late for one of the wounded. He died from blood loss. Another seriously wounded person was brought onto the missile boat, but he also died during surgery. Meanwhile, other Israeli forces simultaneously hit the Fatah headquarters, an explosives workshop in North Beirut, and the main PLO garage near the city of Sidon. At that point, it was no longer a simple assassination mission. In just about 2 hours, the leadership, weapons facilities, command centers, and logistics network of the PLO were hit simultaneously. But now, they just needed to do the most important thing: get out of Lebanon before the entire coastline was completely closed off. When the Israeli commandos arrived at the beach, there was no time to linger. They left the rented cars behind and quickly returned to the Zodiac boats. And from there, they boarded the Israeli Navy missile boats waiting at sea. From start to extraction, the entire operation lasted approximately 2.5 hours. But in that very short time, 3 of the highest-ranking PLO leaders in Beirut were killed. At the same time, other facilities, weapons workshops, command locations, and logistics sites in Beirut were also destroyed. But there was also a price for Israel. 2 Israeli soldiers were killed. After being seriously wounded, some Lebanese security personnel and civilians were also killed in the chaos, including an elderly Italian woman who was caught in the raid in the said residential area. And there was one more very important thing that the Israelis obtained before they left: documents. From Kamal Adwan's apartment, the commandos obtained papers containing information about the PLO's plans and future operations. And this information was very important. That intelligence was used to identify several networks and operatives, and later helped in a series of arrests targeting Fatah infrastructure in territories controlled by Israel. But the political shock in Lebanon was even greater. The next day, news quickly spread that the Israeli commandos had entered Beirut itself, attacked multiple targets, and got out again before they could be stopped. For the Lebanese government, this was extremely humiliating. Prime Minister Saeb Salam announced the resignation of his cabinet, and when the slain PLO leaders were buried, an estimated 250,000 people attended the funeral in Beirut, while thousands more protested in other parts of the country. And here you can see why Operation Spring of Youth became so controversial, but also so famous in military history. The strength of the operation relied on surprise, intelligence, disguise, timing, and speed. This story is proof that in a high-risk operation, the biggest force is always the most dangerous. Sometimes the real advantage lies with the enemy you don't even realize is already right beside you. Because of its success and unique execution, Operation Spring of Youth became the subject of many books, documentaries, and dramatizations about Mossad and Operation Wrath of God. The actual Beirut raid also appeared in the 2005 film Munich, which was directed by Steven Spielberg, and was discussed in the 2006 documentary Mossad's Revenge, as well as in other books about Israeli covert operations. If you like this video, please share it with others and subscribe as well. Also, watch the videos on the right to spend even more of your time.